Welcome to another episode of Chatting with Stacks. I'm your host, Bill Stacks, and today I got a very special guest. I got Frank Calabrese Jr. How you doing, Frank?
Good, Bill. How are you today?
I'm very good, man. I'm really excited about this interview, and I'm really excited. I've been waiting for a long time to do this.
Good. Well, I hope I live up to it.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you will, man. So growing up in Chicago, what are your earliest memories of your dad?
Well, first of all, let me give you a little bit of background of me, okay? I'm half Irish, half Italian, born and raised in Chicago. My Irish side was my mother's side. My Italian side, my dad's side, okay? My dad's side grew up in Little Italy in Chicago, and my mother's side was West Side Irish. On my mother's side, my grandfather, Ed Sticks Hanley, ran with the O'Donnell gang, who fought against Al Capone a lot. Okay, in fact, on my tours, I talk about a story where Al Capone was in the car and they had a shootout, okay, where one of the state prosecutors died. My uncle Ed on my mother's side was the international president of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union, over 350,000 members for over 30 years.
Wow.
On my Italian side, my dad and my uncle were both made members of the Chicago mob. So I always say I was kind of born into this.
Yeah.
In Chicago, you're not supposed to bring your kids into this life. So also in Chicago, a lot of times they would learn from their mistakes that were made in New York, because a lot of originators from New York came over to Chicago through the history. So they went more underground because, you know, they had a new enemy, the FBI. So they're trying to go more legit, go more underground, get away from violence. Chicago went underground. So a lot of people in Chicago, you know, it was hidden. It wasn't out in the social clubs on the corners. So growing up as a kid, I knew my dad was different. Okay, I didn't know exactly what he did. Anytime I'd ask as a kid, he'd say, oh, I'm an operating engineer. Here's me. You drive trains? No. Heavy equipment, operating engineer. Oh, okay. You know, then articles and other kids in the neighborhood, fathers were the same way. So over the years, and then Godfather came out in 72. I was 12 years old. So we started to get an idea what our dads did, but we weren't supposed to ask questions, and we knew it, nor did we care. Bill, it wasn't like we hung on corners. I was going, man, when I get older, I want to be in this life. I want to go to college. I wanted to be a lawyer. I played sports. Our fathers weren't supposed to involve us in this.
You wanted to be a normal kid.
Yeah. So, you know, 10, 12 years old is when I started realizing that my father was, you know, a little different than the rest, and I had an idea what he did.
So growing up, was your father abusive?
You know, it was funny because as a kid, now back in the 60s, you know, discipline, you got spanked, you know, you got slapped on the hand, you got cracked in the back of the head, you got your ear pulled. It was normal. If you disrespected somebody, a lady or something like that, you get a biff in the back of the head, right? We used to call it a palliat. You know, but it was normal. My dad had a problem with his temper. Okay, so he was strict with us, but he wasn't abusive when we were young. He was a good dad. Yeah. What changed him over the years was this life.
So were you seeing like a lot of, you know, negative consequences from his actions in that life?
Not till later on. So when I'm young and, you know, when I'm a teenager, my dad starts grooming me and my brother, because my other brother was 11 years younger than me. And when I say grooming, it's like any father does. They want to teach their kids a little bit about life, a little bit about the street. My dad would say, I want you to go to school, learn book smart, and I'm going to teach you about the street. You use both of them in life. And so he'd give us these little tasks to do. Me, I wasn't paying attention. I mean, a kid, I want to go hang. I want to play sports. So I did them. And the more I did for him and the better it was, the more he started to see of him in me and started taking me more and more. Because of
what kind of things did he have you do?
You know, well, he tested me. You know, one thing he's seen was, and I talk about it in my book, was, you know, one day a guy came father in the driveway, and it was a lot bigger than my father. And I'm just a young kid, and I see the guy yelling at my father. And my father gets right up in his face, but he's lower than him. Well, I run in the garage and I grab a baseball bat because the garage door's open. So I'm walking up on the side of the guy with this. I'm just a teenager with the baseball bat. I figured this guy tries someone to hit him with the bat. Yeah. My father's seen it. The guy backed down right away to my dad and walked away. I went and put the bat back. I didn't pay much attention to what my father seen. So that impressed him that even as a young kid, and I wasn't a troublemaker. My father hated bullies. No, I'd actually cry if I got in a fight because I wanted to be with everybody.
Yeah.
I was so shy. I didn't even want to go to birthday parties because I thought everybody was going to look at me when I walked in the door. So it was a problem I had with my shyness, but he knew that I had balls.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he tested me with stuff like, one time I'm washing his car. I'm 15 years old. I'm washing his car. I go to lift up the mat to vacuum under the car mat, and there's a whole pile of $50s and $100 bills. I'm like, oh, my God. I close the door. I run upstairs and say, hey, Dad, do you know what's under your mat? He goes, yeah, you touch any of it? I go, no. He goes, then go finish the car. So it was little tests like that. He'd take me for rides if he was going to meet somebody. I'd wait in the car. He'd come back. He'd talk about life. He'd talk about girls. He'd just talk about like any father would do. And
so when you're on the streets, though, as a young child or a teenager, are there expectations of you on the streets to live up to your father's reputation?
Not in our neighborhood, no. Like I said, because of the fact it was pretty well known in Chicago that you're not bringing your kids into this life, so you're not expecting them to be a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have your own expectations in life, again, I was good in sports. I won the Golden Gloves when I was 19, undefeated. So, I could handle myself. People knew it. I got in fights just like anybody else, Yeah. My father's big deal was if I was a bully, he would have beat my ass because he hated bullies. But if I got in a fight, even if he taught me, even if you catch your ass, as long as you stand up to what's right, you're all right with me.
So do you have resentment against your father for bringing you in that life?
Well, I don't. That's a big question. It's probably it could be broken down into a lot of different parts. But so my dad's true intention wasn't to bring me into the life. Okay, he brought my uncle into the life, and he brought my uncle into the life, my Uncle Nick, because he didn't trust anybody on the street. And he put a lot into family. So he started out giving me these small tasks. Then I started to go meet guys, collect stuff, bring messages back to him. What happened was at some point, he liked what I was doing, and I bought into my dad and my uncle. I never bought into the mob. I couldn't be in the mob. I'm half Irish. I could never be a maid member.
I wanted to be with them.
I wanted to be with family. And my dad's ideal was, they kind of call us the unmobsters because we didn't dress like mobsters. We didn't drive fancy cars like mobsters. A lot of people didn't even know how deeply involved we were. So we lived two lives. My friends that were close to me had no idea. And the stuff that my dad would give me to do, I wanted to get it done. I worked a full-time job. Mobsters don't work jobs, right?
You worked the job on top of this stuff?
Yeah, I worked the job on top of it. I worked jobs all my life. And then, and then my personal life, and then the time I have to be free for my father. And I always had my own businesses going too. So people didn't have an idea. To me, it was I needed to get this done because of Pete's father. And, and eventually I bought into it.
Yeah, I seen a documentary.
I bought into my father. I mean, I bought into my uncle. I bought into the mob,
Yeah. So I seen a documentary about your family and all that. And it seemed to me, my personal opinion, is that your uncle really didn't want to be in that life either.
Well, again, my uncle bought into a lot of it. My uncle enjoyed crossword puzzles. My uncle enjoyed reading. My uncle was tough in high school, but he was a nice guy. Everybody liked him. My uncle was a soldier. He was he worked on the communications in the USS Bainbridge and Enterprise during the Vietnam War, always volunteering. He had top secret clearance, and he's always volunteering for the most dangerous missions. That's the kind of guy he was. So when he got into this, he believed in my dad. He believed in this life, and he thought it was just like being in the military. Okay.
Yeah.
And he started realizing after a while it wasn't like that. He's seen my dad changing too. This life changes everybody. It changes you. Okay. And it's not always for the best. Some people get in it, get out of it. Some people, it doesn't change much because they don't get too deep. There's different reasons for everybody. So yeah, so no, and when my uncle seen my dad changing and seeing what was going on, and the mob in Chicago was changing at some point, that and the FBI is getting stronger. Yeah, you start second guessing things.
Have you noticed law enforcement around your family as a young age or no?
Yeah, we did see it. We did see it. We experienced it a little, and my dad taught us. I mean, if guys would call and pretend like, hey, how you doing, buddy? Is your dad there? And it was the FBI. Just trying to trust you. And we just always taught to say, no, who's calling? No, who's calling?
What was your dad's position on law enforcement when he would talk to you about it? Would he say, don't ever talk to the cops?
Oh yeah, you never talk. And there's good and bad. And he used to we learned a lot of tactics that the FBI would use, and we would use it in our life too. Surveillance, counter surveillance, little things. He was very detailed with everything. Look, I don't care if you're hungry and you go to McDonald's and you buy a to-go bag because you're walking down the street to meet somebody. No, don't ever carry a bag. There's a burger in there, but if somebody's watching you, they think there's something else in there, and they can turn it around later on through surveillance photos and say, yeah, there is something, and you could have just bought somebody a burger.
Wow, so, I didn't think of it like that, man.
Meeting in the middle of the night, constantly changing our locations, never talking on the phone, codes. We had codes so encrypted that when I was testifying about a conversation between me and my dad, the prosecutor had all the codes and he was still getting confused. It was a language for us, and it was important.
Yeah. So now a lot of people don't know about the Chicago mob. They think that the Chicago mob is kind of like connected to New York. Now, what I want to know is the Chicago mob its own entity outside of New York?
Now, when you say you're talking about the time that I was in the life, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, New York, guys from Chicago, a lot of them originally came from New York. I mean, guys like Capone, Paul Ricca. I mean, there was a lot of guys that came, Johnny Torrio. They came from New York. And when they came from New York, I would say they tried to perfect the mistakes they were making in New York. New York, there was 5 families. They would fight a lot. In Chicago, there was only 1 family.
Yeah.
In Chicago, it was more of a criminal organization. So you had your inner core who were made members, okay? And then you had a lot of associates, people that had a lot of stature in the Chicago mob, but they might have been Greek, they might have been Jewish, and they might have been Irish. But
so they can never be a made member in that.
Be a made member, but they had a high-ranking role in this, organization. It was about money. It was about, so what they wanted to do in Chicago was eventually make a better life for your children. Not doing this like New York, this is our thing. We wanted to, we wanted to grow. We want to bring our kids in. It was like, no, we're going to make a better life for our kids. That's why they got so involved with unions. They got so involved with legitimate businesses to make a better life for your children, so they don't have to go through what you went through. Because basically in this life, they knew it. You're either going to die in jail or get killed, and you don't know how long you're going to last in this life. So it's not a good life.
Mm-hmm. So now, if someone's in New York and they're with a crime family, and say they get banished from New York, can they go to Chicago and be inducted into that family?
I don't know about that. Okay. I don't know of any instances, but I do know that even though it's 2 different groups, you still work together sometimes. So you might be from New York and I'm from Chicago. We have something going on maybe in New Orleans or something, or somewhere, an area that's not claimed for.
A neutral place. Yeah,
neutral. Or say we can do a business somewhere. Say we want to go up to Milwaukee and whoever was in control of Milwaukee, we might have to pay them a few dollars,
Yeah.
we would do business together, but you couldn't. I couldn't go to New York and do business in New York somewhere without getting permission, which you probably usually wouldn't get unless you had to kick something back. So you don't want New York coming into Chicago territory, Chicago going into New York territory. But there wasn't this like fighting and all this stuff where, you know, there was a mutual respect. I mean, at one point before my time, you know, most of the stuff that I've seen or heard, you know, they were trying to make an organization across the whole country.
Yeah.
You know, and they were doing a good job of it, you know, at some point. So, but from my understanding and anything I've experiences, you can work together with somebody. As far as somebody joining another family, I don't know of anybody that did. I don't know if you could or you couldn't. I would imagine that there's certain protocol you got to follow.
Yeah. So, who was the boss of the Chicago outfit when you were around and with these guys?
So when I was young, I seen, you know, you've seen some changes going on, but the majority of the time that I was really involved, it was Joey Aiuppa. And then after Joey Aiuppa, when he went to prison, I was told that it was shared by Sam Carlisi, who was originally from Buffalo, I believe, and Johnny DeFranzo.
And did you ever have any dealings with these people?
Well, Johnny DeFranzo was from our neighborhood, so I knew Johnny well. Sam, I didn't really know. So another thing in the Chicago mob is you don't really associate a lot with other mobsters. You know, big thing with my dad, with our crew was, you know, we're not going to go out, we're not going to hang, we're not going to do all this stuff. Once a month, we would meet at a secret location in the back of a restaurant or something and have a dinner just to relax, bullshit, have some fun. Yeah. And prior to that, when I was young, it was Tony Accardo. Tony Accardo was the boss.
Yeah. So I hear this thing called the Calabrese necktie. And your father made that famous.
Well, people would say it in Chicago, but I mean, it's derived from the Sicilian necktie. So my father, over the years, we could pretty much diagnose him as a sociopath. You know, there were three parts to him. You know, when it came to being a father, he was great at one point. If you met him, you might love him, the good Frank. You know, then there was the street Frank, very street smart, very strict by the rules. And then there was the sociopathic killer. My dad.
Did he drink?
No, he drank when he was younger. He stopped drinking because he didn't like the way he would get mean if he drank, and he didn't like that. Alcohol changed his personality. So he said, if alcohol changes, if it's changed your personality, you don't drink. So he might have one drink once in a while or one beer. Okay. Yeah.
But he wasn't a drinker like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so my dad, his signature trait of killing you, what he enjoyed was he would strangle you with a rope. He liked hands-on. Okay. And he'd strangle you. And once he knew you were dead, he'd cut your throat from ear to ear. So some people started calling it the Calabrese necktie. We never did. I never heard of it till later on. But it's derived from the Sicilian necktie, and that's what they do in Sicily, Sicilian necktie.
Yeah. So when you were younger, did your father ever bring you on a mission like that?
Well, I was I started graduating in. So I started graduating in the arson, to physical violence with people, to backing up my father when he had to send a message by hitting somebody or like that. And then I started planning and assisting with murder and stuff like that. So yeah, but I was never there when my dad actually did that. You know, it got to the point where, which I talk about in my story real quick, was there was a murder that was going to happen. A guy named John Ficarata, who was a family friend, and bunch of things had happened, and the bosses wanted him dead. So they gave the job to my dad and my uncle. John was very street smart and always carried a gun. My dad's concern was that, you know, he probably wouldn't get in the car with my dad and my uncle. So I had said, Dad, I'll do this. This is personal. This is against the family. That may do this. Are you ready? Yes. So we
Did you like the guy, though? Did you like him?
Did I like the guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was nice, but I didn't like what he had done in the prior to this in the last year. So he was changing too, and he was doing a lot of things that were very out of his character. You know, and this guy was a very well-respected, very seasoned mobster. Okay, on Big Stu. So this was going to be very, very difficult job. And that's when I stepped up and I wanted to do it. My father was hesitant at first, but he thought it was a great idea. And this is where I was going to, you know, cross that line. And like I talk about in my book and my tours and everything is, you know, my uncle stopped me from crossing that line. He said he would do it himself. He took the gun that I was going to use and use it as a backup gun. And he was in the car with John alone. And yeah, and John caught.
Oh, is that the one where he jumped out of the car and shot himself in the arm?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So you were supposed to pick him up.
I was supposed to be in the back seat on the passenger side.